Welcome to the Stronger Than Steel podcast with your host, Austin Davidson and John Keir, talking Steelers all the time. Now, here's Austin and John.
Hello and welcome back to the Stronger Than Steel podcast. Today is a special edition of the Stronger Than Steel podcast. With the Steelers and Browns matchup in Week 8 upcoming, I decided to invite my good friend John Goehring from 89.1 The Point back on the show. John, as you might remember from Week 1 earlier this season when I had him on, he's a DJ at The Point, and he works play-by-play for the high school Game of the Week broadcast on The Point. So, John, welcome back to the show.
Well, thank you for having me, John. It's a pleasure to be back.
All right, so Week 8 of the NFL season, the Browns currently sit at 2-4-1. Kind of an interesting record for sure. Let's wind the clocks back to Week 1. A bizarre tie on opening day between the Browns and the Steelers. Certainly not the result either of us expected, but it's quite clear that both teams have changed, and in the Browns' case, certainly improved a lot since then. The most notable change, obviously, has to be quarterback Baker Mayfield. After being inserted into the lineup midway through the third quarter due to a Tyrod Taylor injury, this was the Thursday night game against the Jets. The Browns are now just 2-3 since he, became the starter, with two of those losses coming in overtime as well. So I guess first I want you to talk to me a little bit about what that first win was like as a Browns fan. Mayfield coming off the bench, leading a heroic effort in what was the Browns' first win in almost 2 calendar years, I guess. Just what was it like when the Browns finally won?
Oh, my goodness. That was quite a night. And it being on primetime Thursday night football, that made it extra special, and having all the coolers open and the Bud Light for everybody. Oh, it was just a surreal moment. I didn't really believe it was happening, especially in that game where the team really looked dead the entire first half, trailing by 14. It was a rough game to watch, but then all of a sudden putting in Baker Mayfield, it was like they lit a fire, and the team responded, and coming back and winning that game was definitely one of the most thrilling moments that I have had in my 19 years of being a Browns fan.
Well, it certainly was quite entertaining from an outsider's perspective. And second, let's talk a little bit about Baker Mayfield. We talked about him before. He was the backup to Tyrod Taylor at the beginning of the season. Obviously, after that win, he was inserted as the starter. And even with some struggles from the offense the last 2 weeks, I can say that from my perspective, the Browns are a better football team, a better offense with Baker Mayfield at quarterback. And you were a huge fan of his coming out of college, and when the Browns drafted him, you were excited. Just what has he shown you in the past few weeks that has, impressed you or has, disappointed you? Just what do you like about Mayfield, and what have you seen, and just what does he do differently for this offense?
He's showed poise and maturity, and those are the two main things with him being a rookie coming in, having those off-the-field questions, I guess, you to call them. I think a lot of people doubted him coming in, but he has proven himself to be a mature and poised quarterback who's willing to stand in the pocket and make some throws and take some hits. And sure, he makes some mistakes. He's made a couple of decisions that, had us pulling our hair out as Browns fans, but you know what? More often than not, I feel comfortable with him standing and stepping up in the pocket and even rolling out and scrambling and getting first downs with his legs. I think he's really just a mature rookie that this team has been looking for, who does make some mistakes and has disappointed at times, but overall, I just trust him and his competitive spirit that he's going to come through. And so far, more often than not, he's shown that he does.
It certainly looked like the offense caught some sparks when he was inserted into the lineup. You touched upon maybe the one negative from him compared to Tyrod Taylor is the fact that he doesn't take care of the football as well. But then again, few quarterbacks turn the ball over less than Taylor does. But Taylor also doesn't take many chances. How much more aggressive has the Browns' offense been with Mayfield at quarterback, attacking guys down the field, throwing to guys like Jarvis Landry and the weapons he's had? Has it been a more dynamic offense, or has it just been different, but there are still flaws?
Yeah, I'd say there definitely still are flaws, and it's been more aggressive. I'm not sure if that's the play calling with Mayfield or whether or not that's Mayfield's decision making or some sort of combination of both. But we noticed the difference right away when Baker came in. He is that sort of quarterback who is not really afraid to make the mistake, and he does make a few, but I believe he really has the arm to make up for a lot of the errors that he makes. He can really gun it in there, and that's what I like so much about him. But as far as the offense goes, I feel just different when watching this offense with Baker in, and it seems like the rest of the offense is more motivated, has a little bit of an extra jump to their step, and they are just motivated to perform well with Baker in the game. So I like this offense better with Mayfield for a lot of reasons, and that's not a knock on Taylor. That's just how big of a Mayfield fan I am.
Now, the last 3 weeks, the offense has struggled through certain portions, only putting up 12 points in a win, though, against the Ravens, 14 at home against the Chargers, and then 23 against the Buccaneers. But if I'm not mistaken, most of those came in the fourth quarter of the game. I need to double-check that. Yeah, they scored only 2 first-half points. So I'm sure you've been paying attention, but head coach Hugh Jackson initially said that he was going to get more involved with the offense, and almost kind of from what I saw threw Todd Haley under the bus, and then kind of reversed his trend there the following day when he was talking about maybe not getting involved. So I'm not sure exactly what's going on there. If I had to guess from my perspective, I think that the last 2 losses have been frustrating for Hugh Jackson, and that he might be worried that there's a chance he could get fired soon. So I guess, what are your thoughts on that? And I guess, what do you think is happening there? And I guess just how much longer of a leash does Jackson have if it is a serious issue?
To be honest, I don't really know what's going on either with Jackson. I think what I made of that is that he seemed a little bit insecure, as you said, which is true, and why shouldn't he be? They're certainly looking for a quick turnaround from him, and so far they're getting it. But the last couple of games, we've seen some negative progress from the offense, which will happen, and nobody's really surprised about that. I did also think that he sort of threw Todd Haley under the bus. I don't think it was intentionally to do that, but I feel like with his words saying that he was going to become more involved, that sort of did throw a really good, proven offensive coordinator under the bus, which bothered me a little bit, but at the same time, I don't think he had malicious intent with those words. I think Hugh kind of is the type that isn't so comfortable around the media, and sometimes he makes statements that are kind of just peculiar, but I don't like the idea personally of him getting more involved in the offense, because his play calling, as we've seen in the past, I am not a fan of, and I don't believe his style of offense works with the current offense that we have. And I would say that while Jackson is not a skilled play caller, I like his demeanor as head coach. I feel like he's a patient guy who's going to see this rebuilding process through, and I think management sees a lot of the same thing. And because of that, I don't think he has an extremely short leash, because I feel like they could have fired him after last season if they didn't have a whole lot of faith that he would turn this 1-31 first stretch of 32 games around. But I do think that eventually they're going to have to show some results and be able to win some of these tight fourth quarter football games. And when that happens, that's when his job is more safe. But for now, I do think that he will have the rest of this season to prove himself, since they did trust him to start this season.
Okay. Staying with the offense a little bit, we just talked a good amount about Baker Mayfield, but let's talk about other positions on the offense because there has been turnover at other positions too. Obviously, at the wide receiver position, Josh Gordon and a conditional fifth round pick went to the New England Patriots for a seventh round pick, or maybe I had that backwards. I can't remember. What was the exact trade? I know Josh Gordon went to the Patriots.
No, you're right. Yeah, it was the conditional fifth rounder.
Okay, and then the Browns got back a seventh, right?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, so the wide receiver room was a bit shaken up, and then more recently, just a couple weeks ago, Carlos Hyde was traded to the Jaguars for a fifth round pick. The Jaguars in desperate need of any help on offense there. Most of the Browns running backs, from what I understood, or really teammates, were pretty shocked at the move. But now it's up to the new guys, and I guess what have the Browns lost in these two players, and more importantly, how have their replacements looked, and I guess how do you expect them to look? And I'm talking about like Rashard Higgins, Antonio Callaway, Nick Chubb.
Right.
I guess what are your thoughts on them?
Well, for one thing, the Josh Gordon trade, just to address that really quickly, I feel like that was long overdue, and I wish Gordon the best. I really do think that he's a troubled guy, and I like him personally, but listen, he needs to get his life together, and being a member of the Cleveland Browns was not the way to do that. And seriously, he got injured doing a photo shoot and didn't show up to work. So I really am not the biggest Gordon fan as far as from a football perspective, but I do kind of like him as a guy. I have sympathy for him, and I hope he does well with the Patriots. But with that said, I'm glad we traded Gordon. Hyde, on the other hand, was one of the most peculiar, bizarre moves that I've seen. And I've seen a lot of them in the last few years as a Browns fan. The Hyde trade, that didn't make any sense to me because he was the one back on this team that was able to get 1 yard when you needed 1 yard, that's able to go right into the teeth of the opposing defense. We don't have that sort of powerful running back that we really need. Now with Duke Johnson and Nick Chubb stepping in and having an increased role on the offense, I like those two players, especially Chubb. What he has shown us so far, when he gets the edge, he is a very dangerous running back. The problem is running between the tackles is sort of a different story for Chubb. He doesn't have the size and the strength of Hyde. So that, to me, was disappointing, but it's not a knock on Chubb or Johnson at all. I like the way they've stepped up, and Chubb had a huge game against Tampa Bay. I'm looking for the same thing from him in the coming weeks, and looking forward to seeing what he can do next. As far as the wide receiver position, replacing Gordon, I think they've stepped up nicely, and they've stepped up by committee. He really wasn't much of an impact for the last 4 or 5 seasons, to be honest, with being out all the time with suspension. So this receiver group has been used to having to step up, and he didn't leave Gordon, that is, a big void that they needed to fill. And I like right now Antonio Callaway from Florida. He is a great receiver who's really shown some versatility as far as route running, and he's made some acrobatic catches as well. And also Jarvis Landry, he has a big mouth. He hasn't always been my favorite player, but he has played exceptionally well so far this season. Rashard Higgins, I'm still looking for him to step up and make a bigger impact. But as a whole, I like this wide receiver group. I know it's not the most talented in football on the surface, but as far as the way they've handled the Gordon situation and them having to step up collectively, I'm really happy with what we have at the wide receiver position.
All right, one more guy I wanted to focus in on with the offense is David Njoku. I don't know if he's necessarily flown under the radar in Cleveland, but I think on a national perspective, he's kind of been quiet. He's one of only 2 Browns players, Landry being the other, with more than 1 touchdown catch this year. Has he been dynamic? Has he just been average? Has he been good? What has he brought to the Browns offense this year?
I think he's been average compared to what we were expecting of him. For about a minute there at the beginning of the season, he got a little bit of attention. He actually got some fantasy football attention rising through the rankings, and he was sort of considered to be that sleeper that was going to make a big impact. So I was very, very optimistic about Njoku coming into the season, and so far he hasn't lived up quite to those expectations that I have of him, but at the same time he hasn't flopped either. He has made some nice plays. I think he's an underrated blocking tight end, which is an important thing. Unfortunately, our offense doesn't like to run the ball as much as I would if I was calling the plays, but he can run block, and that's a very important thing for a tight end to be able to do, as you know, I'm sure. And, of course, he can make those catches in the red zone, and that's the place where the Browns are really struggling right now. So I'm encouraged by what he's done. I'm not blown away, that's for sure, but I'm looking for even more productivity from Njoku for the rest of the season.
All right, shifting to the defensive side of the ball, this has been, I think, pretty much a consensus top 10, and I personally think a top 5 unit in all of football. Their specialty has been taking the football away from their opponent, which is probably the biggest compliment you could give a defense. They had 6 takeaways against the Steelers in week 1, and 4 this past week against the Buccaneers. What has been the key to their ability to play takeaway?
Well, I think it's just the aggressive nature that they have. They've really taken a lot of chances, and unfortunately what you don't always see, at least statistically as a result of that, is how they've been burned a couple of times with the vertical passing game, because they like to rush 7 to 8 rushers at times and take those chances and go for the ball when they can. But I feel like that's what the defense needs to do. They need to be aggressive. After all, they're trying to live up to the identity of an AFC North defense, and there's some really good ones in this division, and there has been for a long time, and the Browns haven't really been a very good defense. But this defense, yeah, I would argue right there with you, and of course I might be a little bit biased, but top 5 I don't think is out of consideration. They just need to work on a couple of areas defensively. But yeah, as you said, the turnovers, that's really encouraging to see.
All right, let's look at this upcoming game now. In week 1, as I mentioned, the Browns had 6 takeaways and only 21 points against, despite the fact that James Conner had a great day on the ground and through the air, which oddly enough, you almost predicted with the quote-unquote no-name backs having good days against the Browns. The Steelers' offense seems to have rounded into form the last couple weeks. What's it going to take for the Browns' defense to slow them down, or at the very least force a few big plays like they did last time?
Well, they have to definitely stay disciplined. I think that's the most important thing. The defensive line and the linebackers, they have actually exceeded my expectations when it has come to stopping the run this year. And that first week, that was a big week for Connor, who, by the way, I believe he's an underrated running back in and of himself. And I think the Steelers are fortunate to have had a replacement like Connor to Bell. But the Browns really do have to continue to stop the rushing attack as they have. And then the biggest thing for them is third down efficiency, because opposing teams are very, very good on third down against the Browns for whatever reason. Penalties certainly has been a problem on defense, and it's been hard for them to actually get off the field. But staying disciplined is the most important thing, because the Browns have broken down defensively too often and allowed a running back to come out of the backfield and open for a screen pass, or a quarterback to scramble for a first down at the worst possible time. It's just staying disciplined, but I'm encouraged so far.
All right, and on the other side of the football, it's going to look a little different, as we talked about already, with Baker Mayfield at quarterback instead of Tyrod Taylor. Going into Pittsburgh is tough. The Browns have not won at Heinz Field since 2003. What does Baker Mayfield and the Browns offense, what can they do against a Steelers defensive unit that has been suspect at times but has played better as of late?
Well, they can try to exploit some of the weaknesses the Steelers have, and I know the Steelers are not the best against the pass, and that is something that bodes well for the Browns, because we like to throw the football. Hugh Jackson led teams are really pass-heavy, which is something that I don't usually agree with. But in this case, I think exploiting a Steelers secondary is the most effective way to move the ball against them. I think putting the ball in Mayfield's hands and letting him make some of his own decisions, that's another thing that's going to be big in this game. Letting Mayfield scramble a little bit, seeing if the Browns can get some blocks downfield and open up some space. This Steelers defense is not as intimidating as it has been in past years. I feel like I think that's without a doubt. But Mayfield and this offense, I look for the vertical passing game to be a very huge component in this game for them to really be aggressive against the Steelers secondary.
All right, let's talk a little bit about some injuries. The Browns do have quite a long injury list at the moment. As of yesterday, defensive back E.J. Gaines did not practice with a concussion injury. Demarius Randall, another defensive back, has an ankle injury. He didn't practice. Linebacker Joe Schobert didn't practice. Which one of those guys do you think is the most important, like it's most crucial for them to play?
Probably Schobert, I would say. A lot of those injuries are on the defensive side of the ball, which really hurts the Browns, who don't have that much depth on that side, in my opinion. And Schobert is he's a third or fourth year player. I should probably know that, but he's out of Wisconsin, and he is really, in the last couple of seasons, gone from a rookie who was a strong replacement at linebacker to now a leading linebacker who has become almost the heart and soul of this defense, which is kind of a radical thing to say, knowing how important Myles Garrett has been. But Schobert is that sort of guy who you can rely on, who can make those tackles. And he doesn't get all the glory because he doesn't get the interceptions and the sacks, but he's one of the most solid, if not the most consistent player on our defense. And I hope he's going to be ready to go. I'm not sure exactly. I know he's not practicing. I'm not sure exactly what his status will be. But without Schobert, that would be a huge loss for this Browns defense.
All right, who is one player on offense and defense for the Browns, starting with offense, that is going to be a player you're going to keep your eyes on, someone that we should all be looking out for? And it can be the quarterback if you want, or it could be, the left guard. It could be anybody.
So offensively, I guess I'm going to say that I'm still keeping a very close eye on Nick Chubb. And that's not to take anything away from the importance of the offensive line, because, of course, you can't have a running game without an offensive line. But Chubb is relatively new, and this is going to be his second game as the lead running back. And Duke Johnson is also, an important running back on our team, but he tends to line up sometimes in the slot, only comes in on third downs at times. So Nick Chubb is the guy. I mean, he's the back that's taking the majority of the snaps there in the backfield, standing next to Mayfield in the shotgun. So I'm going to keep an eye on Nick Chubb to see how much progress he makes from last week, which was really encouraging, to this week. And, of course, the offensive line is going to make a big difference in this one, and their play is going to largely determine how he does. But since he's a speed back that likes to get to the edges, and they're definitely going to have him very much involved in the play calling this week, I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do on offense.
And then on the defense, give me one player that's going to be a key there. Give me a guy that's healthy. So not, I know this is kind of unfair, but not Randall, Schobert, or I'm forgetting someone else, not Gaines. So just give me someone else that's going to be the key.
Right. Denzel Ward, in my opinion, and he's also not the healthiest, but if I'm not mistaken, he's good to go. He should be able to play. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Denzel Ward, I believe, is going to be the most critical player on the defense in this game because, yes, the defensive line does need to get some pressure on Roethlisberger, but ultimately the Steelers have a lot of speed, especially at receiver, and our secondary, already without Gaines and already without Randall, as you said, somebody's going to have to step up, and they're going to have to throw in a couple of other cornerbacks who have been a little bit shaky at best, like Brian Body Calhoun. But Denzel Ward, to me, is going to be the leader. He's only a rookie, but he's going to be the leader on this defense, considering all the injuries and considering how the Steelers like to throw the ball so much. And he's going to have to slow down this dynamic Steelers passing attack.
Well, Ward is healthy according to the injury report, and it's also important to mention that in his NFL debut, John, as I'm sure you'll remember when I mention it, if you didn't already, that Ward had 2 interceptions of Ben Roethlisberger in that Week 1 game. You remember that?
Yes, that was exciting.
Yeah, I'm sure it was for you. It was quite frustrating on the other end. But
I'm sure.
The Browns, answer this question for me. The Browns will win this game if the offense does
rushes for over 125 yards.
All right, so the rushing attack is going to be key. And now, conversely, the Browns will win the game if the defense
gets to Roethlisberger 5 times and forces 3 turnovers.
All right, so 125 rushing yards and 5 sacks to go with 3 turnovers. That's the key for the Browns in order to win this game. All right, we've talked about the game. We've talked about the Browns season this year to this point. Kind of a roller coaster ride. But this is a big game for the Browns. They've lost 2 straight, and they're coming into Pittsburgh facing a team coming off the bye. This could be a monumental win for the Browns if they can pull it off. Do you think that they do? Give me a final score prediction.
Well, as much as I'd love to say I think the Browns are going to pull this one off, I'm not so confident based on the last couple of games. I think they're going to start moving in the right direction again. But the last 2 games, they've really gone backwards, and that's been disappointing to see. And this game's on the road. And for me, this prediction is more of a credit to how much the Steelers have turned their season around than a knock on the Browns in any way. I think the Browns improve this week and play a much better game. I just like the Steelers' offense so much, and I like their passing attack right now. Watching part of that Atlanta game, my goodness, the Steelers are still a threat. With that said, I think the Steelers score 34 points, and I think the Browns score 28. I think it'll be a close game right down to the wire. Steelers will, though, score a late touchdown to go ahead, and a Browns rally will fall short, as it seems to always do. So it's always tough to lose to the Steelers as our rivals. I think you're a great guy, but Steelers fans in general are not usually our best friends. So it's always tough to lose to the Steelers, but the Browns, I think, are going to play a much better game this week.
All right, you heard it here first on the Stronger Than Steel podcast. John, thank you so much for joining me again. I got to be honest, I don't see a possibility of the 2 teams playing in the playoffs right now. The Browns and Steelers have only met twice in postseason history during their long respective team histories. But, if they did, it would certainly be a fantastic storyline. I'd get to bring you back on the show. But in case they don't, because it looks like they probably won't, I wanted to thank you for coming on the show twice this year. And I'm hoping we get a chance to do this again next year.
For sure, John. Anytime. It's so much fun talking to you. And, you never know, so I wouldn't quite rule it out yet. But I think the Steelers are going to have to really step it up if they want this long-awaited meeting with the Browns in the playoffs.
Yeah, it's certainly crazier things have happened. It's the any given Sunday for a reason. So I'll keep in touch with you certainly throughout the rest of the season. I look forward to kind of seeing what's going on with the Browns because they're the new hot and up and coming team. But until then, I'm hoping they have a bit of an off week, as I'm sure you're feeling for my team as well. But as always, John.
Absolutely.
As always, John. Thank you so much for joining me today. You have a fantastic day.
Thank you. You too,
John. You have been listening to Stronger Than Steel podcast. Thank you for joining us today, and don't forget to check out our website listed in the description below.